Welcome to the Patron Saints of Pop Culture podcast. I'm Miguel Covarrubias. This month we are discussing Lovecraft Country, the HBO series adaptation of the book of the same name. Thank you so much for listening. I do truly appreciate it. Please review and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Today we will be talking about story diversity and inclusion, blind spots, and the importance of naming yourself. Of course, I'll also share Saints of Show at the end. Before we get into it, some updates and announcements. Don't forget to support Kathy's Cottage Industry Home Sweet Bakery. If you are in the East Cleveland area and need cakes, cupcakes, or pies, think Home Sweet Bakery. Kathy makes delicious treats at reasonable prices that look just as good as they taste. Season 1 of The Lost Letters has wrapped up. Go and check it out on your favorite podcast platform. Peter, my son, has also wanted to get into the podcast game. He has a short 2-minute show called St. Peter's Shorts. Alright, no more delay. Let's jump through the sketchy magic portal in the wall opened by an equally sketchy machine built by a racist wizard in an abandoned observatory and get into Lovecraft Country. There was a lot in Lovecraft Country. I was talking to my coworkers about it, and they said they missed so much the first time through, and were pretty sure they didn't catch everything the second time either. In fact, I could probably spend an entire podcast talking about each individual episode and end up with 10 episodes of just my talking about each one. I wouldn't even be able to scratch the surface of each one, and I'm definitely not going to do it in this next 45 minutes. There is so much there, which is a testament to the work put in on the show. You can see the fingerprints of all of the artists who helped. The main cast was incredible. Props to the casting director, especially for the main cast. Journey Smollett, Jonathan Majors, Michael K. Williams, Wunmi Musaku, Abby Lee Kershaw, Anjune Ellis, Courtney B. Vance, Jamie Chung, Jada Harris. They were all incredible. Even the writers, directors, and producers, and all crew involved. I wasn't surprised at all to see Jordan Peele's name as an executive producer on the show. He has this uncanny ability to be able to teach people how things really are in America through fiction horror. As I said last month, he is one of the reasons why I think we are in the new golden era of horror. Misha Green's work on adapting this book was amazing. Her writing, I'm only familiar with from Heroes, and I'm going to attribute the amazing first season to her, because any of the others would probably be insulting. I haven't seen Underground, but I'm certainly interested now. I'm not going to talk too much about my former favorite director and showrunner too much, J.J. Abrams. I feel like he doesn't really know how to finish stories very well. Lost, Fringe, Alias, Rise of Skywalker, Star Trek Into Darkness, Cloverfield. Luckily, the Abrams curse, as I'm going to call it now, did not affect Lovecraft Country. I think the show came to an excellent resolution. All paths were wrapped up pretty nicely to give a compelling and satisfactory whole. Misha Green did hint to Rolling Stone that there may be plans for a round 2. However, HBO has yet to order more. And I doubt that they would bring Tick back from the dead in a way that would be satisfying. His death was rather meaningful. It was an extraordinary story. It also helped to highlight a lot of my own blind spots that I hadn't known about before. In fact, so much so, I feel very inadequate to be discussing it. If you enjoy multi-layered stories that don't play to the lowest common denominator in the audience, you'll love Lovecraft Country. I mean, you probably already watched it, which is why you're listening. So, if not, go watch it and then come back. Alright, let's talk. So there was a part of me that wanted to talk about separating art from the artist, as many H.P. Lovecraft fans are ready to do in an effort to defend his work. But I think I'll just briefly talk about this, as I think spending too much time focusing on the monsters doesn't allow us the chance to not be monsters ourselves. The author H.P. Lovecraft was about as monstrous as his antagonists. I don't think we can remove the art from the artist, as art is a very personal thing. I think especially music, writing, and media reflect as much of the artist as it does the bits of ourselves that we find in these pieces. For instance, Louis C.K. I used to love his show and his work as a comedian. After his scandal, even though he apologized, I can't separate that work from him, as it happened around the same time. I do feel that we should allow people the chance to become better and not monsters anymore, but that's a long conversation for another time on how to do so. Instead, I want to spend more time on a topic that I only briefly touched on 2 months ago in our discussion of Hollywood, the importance of diversity and inclusion in our stories. As Tick liked to escape into stories, so often do I do the same. I personally didn't realize how biased and glorifying of horrid things sheltered narratives could be until I started hearing stories from the outside of the worldview I grew up in. If this is your first time joining me in conversation, I grew up in a very sheltered evangelical Christian community that was highly insular, so much so that my family was highly encouraged to only consume Christian media. We still had our family nights with Blockbuster Video and got to go to the movies with friends, but it was still very sheltered from the secular. This is a form of manipulation and mind control. If you can control the stories that your followers consume, you control how they view the world. And as Falcon in the new Falcon and the Winter Soldier trailer said, now instead of Shield Think Story, the legacy of this shield is complicated. The story of stories is complicated. It is important for our stories to be diverse and inclusive of different perspectives, otherwise we end up in echo chambers. In an interview for Den of Geek, Jonathan Majors, who plays Atticus Freeman, talked about how Tick would react to the recent rise of diversity and inclusion in our stories. He said, I think Tick, he would be on cloud 9. I wonder if he would have seen it before the war, what he would have done. I wonder if he would have gone off to the war, or if he would have just continued to live his life, having had seen himself already take it in and taking on that adventure, that soldier, that mentality. He wouldn't have to escape reality. He'd just sit in the movie theaters and take in a different reality. I love this. This is why I do the show, after all. It's a way of helping us process what we took away from the realities we see in pop culture. One of the responses to my prompt for Saints of Show called this out as well. I won't read it here, but I loved what she said. Stick around and you'll hear it. Human beings are narrative-based creatures. We need story to help us make sense of the world around us. This can even be seen within the universe of the show. The sons of Adam rallied around the stories of the Book of Names. Letty also makes mention of how personal stories can affect our lives in episode 4 when she makes an off remark towards Tree and the stories that he told about her in high school. Stories shape us. They mold how we see the world and how we problem solve. To borrow another piece of pop culture story from Marvel, like how Spider-Man knows how to take down Giant Man from the old movie. We as a culture, I'm speaking of America and our Western influences, have been extremely insulated as a culture for a long time. We have only had white, heteronormative, cisgendered, male-centric stories told to us and therefore have only had that one road to choose from when we problem solve. Even the stories that have attempted to bring in diversity and inclusion have pulled from that same trope well. There are no white saviors in the story. There are strong women in the story, and all of the characters are complex and real in their own ways. Tick, in his conversation with Gia, shows that he and she both knew that they were monsters in their own stories, but they chose to be better from then on. We saw Montrose and his force coming out to Tick, helping Tick to not only better understand his father, but somewhat come to terms with him. I mean, that's right from a story that I've been in the process of writing for close to 11 years. I would love to be able to go time travel to understand a bit of what my father is and the way that he could be or why he is the way that he is. Anyway, back to Lovecraft Country. Our stories are starting to show heroes as they are, flawed, fallible, and human. This allows us to give ourselves grace when we don't meet perfection. It allows us to put ourselves in other people's shoes and understand where they're coming from and why they approach things the way that they do. In essence, it makes us more diverse and inclusive by having pop culture touchstones of diversity and inclusivity. This is very important to me, as I've learned surprisingly late in the game, like this past year, about some of my own blind spots. And it's thanks to these stories of inclusivity and diversity. For instance, I didn't know about the Tulsa Massacre until this year. That's a huge blind spot. 300 Americans, as estimated by archaeologists and historians, may have been killed on that night in 1921. The original estimates only said 39, but due to so many being hospitalized and history completely leaving out that event from textbooks and other media, until recently, it may well be the 300, if not more. I didn't know about this event until watching Watchmen, another HBO series that brought some of the same inclusive storytelling. Kathy turned to me and said in the opening scenes, "Did you know about that? I heard about it from a podcast." And I didn't. I didn't hear about the Tulsa Massacre until that moment. I didn't know about Bessie Springfield until my son, Peter, was doing a report for his preschool. Yeah, you heard that right. A report for daycare. It was a family project we had to do for Black History Month. It was awesome. If you didn't know already, the lady on the bike that passed Hippolyta on the highway was Bessie Springfield. She is such a cool figure. There is a pretty cool comic book out there that we used for our report. Bessie Springfield was also intersected with one of the whitewashed blind spots, the Green Book. Yes, it's a real thing, not just that movie with Aragorn. I know his name is Viggo Mortensen, but he will always be Aragorn to me. Bessie was given the Negro Motorist Green Book by one of her love interests over the years that helped to keep her safe on the road as she traveled across the country a few times on her bike. In Lovecraft Country, both George and Hippolyta wrote for the book. We also saw in the first episode how, if it doesn't get updated often, it could prove dangerous. This also led to another blind spot for me. I didn't know about sundown towns. I didn't know there was such a thing that if you weren't white and the sun went down in the town, you were taking your life into your own hands. Hell, even now, the Wikipedia article on sundown towns attributes this to only Alabama and Mississippi. They went to Maine in the show, where the racist sheriff told them that they were in a sundown county. These counties and towns were all over America. These sorts of things are still happening to this very day, despite no longer getting media coverage. Even as a white passing man with a Latinx name, I'm afraid to be out after dark in rural counties in my own state. I had a conversation with a woman earlier this summer about her son in Texas. She had seen our signs in our front lawn that expressed their support for Black Lives Matter, as well as other things. She stopped by to ask where we got them. She told me, someone who actually grew up for the most part in Deep South Texas, about sundown counties that her son and granddaughter drive through often in the Houston area. Although, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised considering Texas just tried to sue other states to illegitimize their votes. The thing is, we all have blind spots. We can all be ignorant to another's experience. Discrimination is a universal human experience. Some have dealt with it in more harsh ways, such as those of us with darker skin tones and non-Western European heritage. I think that is one of the biggest points made in Lovecraft Country, is that one of the scariest things about our own reality is the way that we humans treat other humans. I told the woman who I was talking to that I couldn't imagine what she was going through. I still can't. I can't imagine what people are struggling with. I can't imagine how hard it must be for some people to just be afraid to go out of their house or to be caught somewhere after dark. It's horrible. This brings me to another blind spot. I didn't know about Emmett Till. What a horrific story. And yes, Emmett Till was real, and what happened to him was real. My heart weeps for people these days. Because I'm white passing, I have a lot of blind spots, even to the struggles of Latinx people, a community which I belong to. The most public of the Latinx struggles in this country is the continued use of the camps along the border and the continued separation of families at the border. The whole premise of this show is about the lengths that Tick goes to for his family. And on that, the USA is guilty of separating children from their parents. And that may prove to be our undoing as a country when those children grow up and realize what was done to them. America creates these blind spots to make us think the country was once great. We've never been great unless you are a white, rich, straight, cis male with the right pedigree. Which brings us to our next topic, the importance of naming yourself. If you've listened to any of our shows over the past 2 years, you'll know that I've been on a journey of self-discovery. Hippolyta's journey was very poignant to me. Once I figured out what was going on, it was a bit trippy. She found different pieces of herself. She found the strong warrior woman. She found her sexuality. She found her role as a spouse. She found her role as a smart diplomatic repairwoman in space. All of these things she claimed and named herself. She found that she was shrinking herself for other people. And this was such a meaningful episode to me because growing up, I was always taught not to want things for myself. This weird and twisted idea of Christianity got programmed into me that I needed to want what their deity wanted, which was to save all mankind. That's not my job. That's nobody's job. That's too much job for anyone. This is a bastardization of what Christianity was. It's one of the reasons why I can't anymore with religions. Religions were meant to help humans, not to be taken over and used to further human greed, lust, and corruption. I'll not spend too much time on this as I could go on for hours. I shrunk myself for far too long in order to fit into this role in a religion. Suffice to say, religions were a path to find oneself, a method to discover and name yourself. Never was it meant to fit you into a robotic mold of what a insert religious title here should be. Letty discovered this for herself when she was reminiscing about her mother and the faith that she was finding for herself. This was seen in the moments before the end where Tick was baptized and I'm guessing married Letty. He was choosing his own name. She chose him and she chose her own name. Tick knew what he needed to do. Tick knew what needed to happen. He chose to die to save his family. That right there is a huge Christological symbol. Even the pose that he was in evokes the image of the crucifixion. I think that right there is a bigger symbol of what a proper religion should be. A finding of self and coming to terms with one's role that they must play in life. He made peace with his father, step or not. He made peace with his family. Hippolyta helped to make peace for Dee. Each character in their own way came to terms with themselves. They made peace in their own way with each other. Even poor Ruby, in her last moments, trying to get the potion for Letty and Tick. That's not to say that these characters had it all figured out by the end. Otherwise, there would be no season 2. This is why we name Saints of Show. It's important to name our role models. It's important to see how we should strive to handle our issues in life. Granted, I'm pretty sure there's no such thing as magic in this reality. We get to travel to other worlds, and through these stories, take home with us new ways to live and to see life. So let's name our Saints of Show. From Instagram, we had a lot of great responses this last month. From Miss Naomi, she commented, Misha Green, for bringing us this unique story to life on screen and showing us the brilliance and importance of Black stories in sci-fi, horror, fantasy genres. Tina Marie, 514, commented, Letitia fucking Lewis. I just loved her from beginning to end. A dynamic woman. I agree. I am Nina Monet. Commented, Anjanae Ellis, Hippolyta Freeman. I'm a little biased because that's the love of my life, lol. But her character screamed at me. As a young girl, and even as a young adult, I was so used to shrinking myself to make others happy, not believing in my gifts and talents, and based a lot of what I did on what other people thought of me. Hippolyta discovered the power of naming herself. She explored her sexuality, she fought in a war, she revisited her husband, and she gained all of that knowledge and still chose to name herself as Mother and love on her baby D. Sad face emoji. That is power. I believe that was an ode to black women all over the world that made my soul happy. I look at myself differently as a 21-year-old and believe that I have the power to name myself. Hashtag I am Nina Monet. Hashtag the creative. Smiley winky face emoji. Heart emoji. And my saint of show, I would definitely agree so much with Nina Monet that Hippolyta was my saint of show. Well, I wasn't a little girl, nor am I a woman, but just the strength in knowing who you are and being that authentic self. Even before her strange astral trip, she knew who she was, and she was going to be that. For that, she gets named Saint Hippolyta, the saint of knowing oneself and owning it. Don't forget to join the conversation. You can do so on Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, www.patronsaintsofpopculture.org. And obviously, we couldn't talk about all of Lovecraft Country because we would be here for way over the time. If you want me to talk about more, come back and let me know. If you'd like your Saint of Show shared, please let us know either in our DMs or comment on the prompt being posted on social media shortly. Please remember to review and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Next month, I'll be talking about The Mandalorian Season 2. Until that time, be you. It's all you got, and it's all you can be.